I'm Norki, and this is Lost in Localization, Zelda 2. First, here's a list of things covered in the videos for prior entries in this series. And now, let's move on to the title, which is Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link in English. In Japanese, the title is The Legend of Zelda 2,
リンクの冒険
with the main series title written in English for some reason. As mentioned in the first video in this series, the Hyrule Fantasy doesn't return. And while The Adventure of Link is a valid translation that seems to follow suit with Zelda no Densetsu, The Legend of Zelda, the no here simply connects the two nouns, showing possession in this case. So, I think Link's Adventure is a better translation. Unfortunately, this insistence on translating the particle no to of led to several other unnatural translations in the manual. The first is
後世のトライフォースを操る者
which became you who'll control the Triforce of the future, where no connects future with this clause that modifies person, and that better translates as the person in the future who'll control the Triforce. The second is
冒険の旅
which became Journey of Adventure, a very literal translation for which adventure alone would be better. Finally,
死の谷
became Valley of Death in several places. This is neither wrong nor unnatural, but the Japanese manual is essentially already using the English words Death Valley in that order. The background story pages and the map page in Japanese even insist upon using Death Valley as the reading over the top of the Japanese word. But the English version is inconsistent and switches between wordings. The tendency to shorten names to make things easier to say in Japanese results in
リンボー
for this entry. Moving on to the manuals, we find mistranslations and mistakes throughout. A very minor difference lies in the sentence
16歳の誕生日を迎えたリンク
where mukaeta is the past tense of mukaeru, meaning to welcome. When used with events, in this case Link's 16th birthday, it simply means that the event occurs in one's life. So basically, Link had his 16th birthday. I was tempted to equate this to the English word celebrate, but it is also used in the phrase
死を迎える
meaning to meet one's end, for which celebrate isn't really appropriate. Around this time, a mark appears on Link's hand. After his birthday in Japanese, before his birthday in English. After explaining that the royal family has a tradition of naming every girl Zelda, Impa introduces the Zelda of this game as
初代ゼルダ姫
the first or original Princess Zelda. This made me wonder if she's a different Zelda to the one in the first game, and this website confirmed that she is indeed a
別人
different person. The English manual doesn't mention this. The palaces are called
神殿
in Japanese, literally God Hall, and therefore better translated as temples like in later games. A more common Japanese word for palace is
宮殿
which doesn't appear in the Japanese version. The stone statues into which Link inserts the crystals are called
心臓
God statue in Japanese. And on page 38 is the Japanese word
聖域
sacred region, both of which further indicates temple as the best English equivalent. The Japanese map page explains Link's mission, listing
神殿
for the standard palaces and
大神殿
for the Great Palace. A lack of plural form in Japanese led to a translation reading, after defeating the Guardians at the palaces of Death Valley, which leads to two possible misunderstandings. One, there are multiple palaces in Death Valley, or two, the entire continent is called Death Valley. However, the Japanese clearly uses the word
大神殿
in this paragraph, which refers to only the very last level. Page 18 in the English manual reads, "Points remaining shows how much of Link's 3 powers can be used later using his ability corresponding to the level for that power." Even as a native English speaker, I can't really make sense of this. The Japanese reads,
レベルはその力に対するリンクの能力で、ポイント残はその力をあとどれだけ使えるかを示している。
where the de marks the end of the first point of the sentence, pointozan means amount of points, and ato dore dake means precisely how much left. Therefore, the sentence as a whole means the level shows Link's capabilities in each power, and the amount of points shows exactly how much more he can use each one. On page 22 of the Japanese manual is the sentence,
その時、敵たちの影が
which was translated literally as just then the shadow of the enemy. Neither the English nor the Japanese have a verb here, but this is common and quite natural in Japanese. The verb is implied. The English language, however, doesn't sound natural when the verb is omitted. The controls explanation on page 22 of the English manual doesn't separate the D-pad into several directions like the Japanese manual does. For up, we have
ジャンプ中、
mid-jump,
ジャンプ付き、
jump thrust or up thrust. For down, we have
ジャンプ中、
mid-jump,
下付き。
down thrust. The English marks the entire D-pad as the controls for lower shield, jump, thrust in middle, down. I don't know how this happened. The Moblin appears in this game too, again romanized as Moblin. The Geldarm is introduced on page 28 of the Japanese manual, which seems to have gone through a few changes to ultimately be romanized incorrectly. The word worm is katakanaized as
ワーム、
with an A, as this is the closest vowel in Japanese. This then had
ゲルド、
attached to form
ゲルドアーム、
which was then logically romanized as Geldarm. An O and the pronunciation Gelderm would better show its etymology in English, much like the original Zelda's Molderm. This Gerudo seems to have been made up to mean desert dwelling, as it's used for beings in later entries in the series such as the Gerudomon and Gerudo. The headline of page 33 reads,
ここだという時にはマジックも使わなくてはね。
Magic must be used when necessary. The English reads, magic should only be used when you need it. A slight nuance difference. The pages about the towns are considerably different between versions. The English mentions that there are swordsmen in some of the towns, whereas the Japanese explains
町、
town,
入り口、
entrance,
立て札、
signpost,
立っている。
exists standing. There are signposts at the town entrances.
B ボタン、
B button,
押せば
if press,
町の名前、
the town's name,
わかる。
be understood. If you press B, you'll learn the town's name. The English then has a second section that explains about the swordsmen, while the Japanese merely asks the player to be patient when wait is displayed while the game loads the town. On the next page, Hanashi got translated as story, but in this case it basically just means spoken information, or what one has to say. The Japanese headline on page 37 reads,
魔法を教えてもらったら確認してみよ
When you're taught magic, confirm it on the subscreen. The tara conditional can be translated to English as if or when. The official translation uses the less natural of the two. This happens again on the page that explains about the Great Palace.
う。6つのクリスタルを心臓にはめ込んだら
If or when you've inserted the 6 crystals. When is the better option here. The translator chose if. The fairy magic reads,
崖など険しい地形が苦手な君は使ってみるのもいいね。
You, as someone who has trouble navigating precipitous areas like cliffs, should try using this. The pronoun you refers to all players who are controlling Link. He is inherently poor at crossing large gaps and climbing vertical shafts, so this magic is essential for clearing the game. However, the official translation reads those of you, suggesting that only a subset of players cannot navigate such areas. The fire magic reads,
敵の中には効き目のないすごいやつもいる。
Among all enemies, some are incredible in that this magic has no effect. The English, however, reads, there are bound to be some enemies that hate this fire. These sentences are actually both true and are supposed to be different, based on gameplay differences. Reflect was mistakenly named reflex in Japanese, and the thunder magic reads,
画面上
on the screen,
特定の敵
certain enemies,
すべて
all,
ダメージを与えることができる。
can inflict damage. The English translation dropped the certain part and explains that this magic damages all enemies. On page 45, the English manual explains that items can be obtained by striking them with the sword, which is true of all items in the Japanese version, but only required for the magic jars and treasure bags in English. Speaking of the treasure bags, the Japanese reads,
敵から出たりもする。
they also materialize from enemies. This was mistranslated as enemies sometimes materialize from them too. The dolls were also slightly mistranslated in that the English reads that Link's life increases by 1, when actually Link's lives increase by 1. On the next page, the handy glove and boots are both modified by the word
聖なる
in Japanese, meaning sacred or holy. The Japanese explanation for the boots reads,
履くと神様に近づけるという。
it's said that you can approach the gods if you wear these. This information is a setup for a hint found on the wall of a house in Darunia that reads,
ナボールのずっと東に神が住む。
the gods live far east of Nabooru. The English explanation reads, you can do something extraordinary, which is quite cryptic and not very helpful. The Japanese explanation for the flute uses the word
音色
meaning timbre, which the English manual translated as simply music. And the magical key apparently opens several locked doors, rather than however many, like the Japanese explains with,
いくつでも。
Before moving on to the game, I should explain the gameplay differences between the versions when it comes to the leveling system. In Japanese, the player is free to level up any skill when they accumulate the required amount of experience for the next level. The first one requires 50 experience, and the second and third require 100. As the player reaches these thresholds, they can upgrade any of the 3 skills in any way they want. 1 upgrade per skill, or 2 for one and 1 in another, or even 3 in just one. Attack! Contrast this with the English version, which requires different amounts of experience for each level up in each skill. The first increase for life, magic and attack requires 50, 100 and 200 experience respectively, for example. Due to this, the game offers the player the option to cancel the level up and to continue collecting experience until they reach a higher threshold for a skill they'd prefer to upgrade. The Japanese version does not allow cancelling, as there's no benefit because any skill can be upgraded at any level. In addition, the English version resets your experience points to 0 when you run out of lives or reload a saved game. On the other hand, the Japanese version resets all of Link's abilities to the level of the lowest skill. The manual attempts to provide a reason for this by saying,
これがリンクの本当のレベル。
This is Link's true level. Fortunately, the translator was aware of these differences and did not blindly translate what was written in the Japanese manual regarding leveling, at least. Further differences are found in-game, with different amounts of experience gathered from defeating the same enemy in each version, and in enemy vulnerabilities, which I'll cover as I explain Link's progress through his adventure. Upon entering a name for the file, Link spawns in the North Castle and can travel east to the first town, the katakana for which is
ラ、ウ、ル、ラウル。
Here, he meets a man who tells him
3つの力、
the three powers,
レベルが揃えば
if their levels match,
真の力となる。
they will be your true power. This is a Japan-only tip that explains that your true level is equal to your lowest skill. In English, this man says, if all else fails, use fire, which is an English-only tip explaining that some enemies are only vulnerable to the fireball that can be used after casting the fire spell. This tip comes very early, considering Link will not encounter such enemies until quite late in the game. A lady in purple here uses the word
じいちゃん、
meaning grandfather in Japanese, which was changed to father in the English version. This is probably due to a limit on the number of characters that could be used. Seems the localizers had 4 lines of 10 characters to work with, and, of course, they wouldn't want to split words across lines. In this video, I'd like to try to improve the English text. So, in this case, how about meet my grandpa before you leave town? After entering the woman's house, Link can talk to her again. In Japanese, she says
マジシャン、
which was localized as wise man for the English version. Again, we can make this better resemble the original Japanese with learn from a magician in each town. Also in Darunia, a child tells Link, get candle in Parappa Palace, go west, which could easily be misunderstood as go west in order to get the candle in Parappa Palace. The Japanese, however, reads
ろうそくを取ったら
when you've acquired the candle,
西のトンネルから
from the tunnel to the west,
次の神殿に行け。
go to the next temple. The child sprite does not appear at all in the Japanese version, and neither does this woman nor this man. An improvement to the hint this child gives may be get candle in Parappa before going west. There is a woman in each town who heals Link, and in the Japanese version, 5 dots appear to represent her silence while she does her thing. This moment is mentioned in the Futami guide on page 35.
この場面やセリフをなんとなくいやらしいと思った人たちは変な漫画やテレビの見過ぎだと思います。
People who believe this interaction to be lewd have dirty minds from consuming too much unsavory media. In the area surrounding town, Link encounters aches, bits, bots, dealers, and moblins. In the cave to Parappa Desert, he encounters a loader, and in the desert itself, he encounters the Zelda. To the south of the temple are Megmats and Agoria guarding the first heart container. According to the Futami guidebook, this region resembles Ganon's face. Whether this was intended or not is uncertain. Inside the temple are Bubbles, Guma, Iron Knuckles, the Stalfos, and the Was. The Stalfos was changed to Stalfon in the Japanese version, and the Guma is described as a cow-like monster and Hyrule's Hammer Bro in the Futami guidebook. The was, likely from wolf, originally had a long vowel pronounced
ウォース
which is hard to Romanize. Doubling the O results in woos, and adding an R changes the pronunciation for English speakers who would pronounce it. Interestingly, the was doesn't take Link's experience in Japanese. Finally, the boss is called
マズラ
which happens to resemble the word
馬面
literally meaning horse face. Again, the Futami guidebook even uses this word in its advice.
マズラの馬面を狙って倒せ
Aim for Mazura's horse face and bring him down. I think the localization team missed a trick here in not localizing the name as Mazla. After clearing the temple and acquiring the candle, Link heads to Ruto. An old woman here tells Link about the hammer and describes it as sacred in the Japanese version. The woman in red outside this house explains that the Goria of Tantari stole the town's
女神像
goddess statue, which was localized as trophy for the English version. Again, possibly due to the character limit. In retrieving the statue, Link encounters Octoroks. And when he returns it to the woman, she invites him to speak with her uncle. Again, this was originally
おじいさん
or grandfather in Japanese. And if we change uncle to grandpa, it fits. The woman's grandfather teaches Link the jump spell, which allows him to proceed through this cave where he encounters the Ache Man. He emerges in a swamp for which the name is
もるげモルゲ
Here, Link encounters Moby. And on the bridge leading to a nearby town are Bago Bago, a word with a sense of continuously opening and closing, and therefore perhaps gradually biting away at something. The name of the town itself is
サリアサリア
Saria, or even Saria, but definitely not Saraya, which would be katakanarized like this. It's known as a water town in both versions, with a river running through the middle, which made me wonder if the name was derived from the onomatopoeic word
サラサラ
the rippling of a stream. However, Haruka wasn't convinced. This woman in purple tells Link she's lost her mirror and uses the onomatopoeic word
しくしく
in Japanese, indicating weeping or sobbing. Outside of a forgettable hint in the manual, there's no reason the player would know to check this table for the mirror, but that's exactly what they have to do. The English text here is famous for being one of the few times in the series that Link actually talks, using I to refer to his own actions. The Japanese doesn't use a pronoun, and while it does end the sentence with zo, which adds the sense of a strong declaration, it's still ambiguous whether these words are Link's or not. But given the tendency within the series to append zo to item acquisition messages, I'm going to assume they're not. Returning the mirror to the woman allows Link to meet the town's magician, who grants him the life spell. Also in this town is a man who needs to be convinced to let Link cross the river. A purple bit/bot gives a hint on how to convince him. The first 3 times Link interacts with it, it says ZZZ in English, an appropriate translation of the Japanese word
グーグー
which is onomatopoeia for snoring. After waking, it says, "Let me be. Master is in woods, N of river," which could surely be improved. How about, huh? Bugs in woods north of the river. Obviously this is using the name of a character Link hasn't learned yet, and I've fixed the awkward romanization of Bug's name, but at least my hint doesn't abbreviate north. Following this hint leads Link to Bug's house, where he gets a note to show to Riverman, who will then let him cross the river. Now it's time to traverse Death Mountain, where Link encounters Daida and unfortunately, about halfway through, an unvanquishable enemy, the Mew. It's so small it cannot be attacked as it menacingly guards this platform, threatening to knock Link to a fiery death should he even dare to approach, safe in the knowledge that Link has no way to Link finds the hammer at Spectacle Rock and can use it to destroy the boulders that block the roads. Destroying this one opens the road to Mido, for which the katakana is
Mido, Mido.
not Mido, which would be written like this. Interestingly, the capital city of Japan's Ibaraki prefecture, situated near a river, is called
Mitoshi.
or Water Door, and the city's website explains its etymology.
古代から海や川の水の出入り口は水または港と呼ばれていました。
The name for the entrance to the water of rivers and oceans has long been Mito, or Minato. The second kanji of its name often takes a dakuten too, changing its pronunciation from to to do, which suggests that both Mito and Mido are interchangeable names for places used as entrances to water. Again, I wondered if this might be a clue towards Mido's etymology, but again, Haruka wasn't convinced. In Mido, a woman says, "No one is here, but a church bell will ring." The Japanese hint explains in more detail.
教会の神父もいないのにいつも鐘が鳴る。
The church priest isn't there, but the bell always rings. This is a hint towards investigating the church, where the swordsman teaches Link the down thrust. My improvement to the English hint this time is, no priest is there, but the bell rings. An old woman in town says, "Please, my daughter is sick. Help her." This is similar to the Japanese, which is just a tad more desperate in that it reads,
娘が病で死にそう。おいおい。
"My daughter may die from her illness." Sound of wailing. Thanks to the townspeople, Link masters the down thrust, learns of a hidden tunnel south of the king's tomb, and acquires the fairy spell, which is explained better in Japanese.
この呪文で
With this spell,
妖精の力
the power of a fairy,
借りるがよい。
you should borrow. The English version merely says, "This magic word will give you power." You mean, just like every other spell? My improvement here is be a fairy with this magic word. After doing all this, it's finally time to go to Midoro Swamp for the second temple. I think Midoro may be a portmanteau of
緑、
green and
泥、
mud. Because, of course, the swamps are green, and the word doro is used in the Japanese manual's explanation for the swamps. New enemies in Midoro Temple are the Ra and,
アーネル。
if you're playing the English version, they only appear in the Great Temple in Japanese and are switched with blue Octoroks in all other areas. Interestingly, the lava pits are referred to as
血の海。
Seas of Blood in the Futami Guide. The item acquired here is the Sacred Glove, and the boss is Germa Fencer. On his way to the Island Temple, Link encounters Moa, who take his experience in English, but not in Japanese. The King's Tomb is different too. In Japanese, it's a scrolling fight scene, but in English, it's a single screen with an NPC. Inside the temple, Link encounters the Doom Knocker and Armored Stalfos,
ヘルグーマ、
and
パルタム。
respectively in Japanese. The Heruguma is likely a combination of helmet and guma, as the Futabasha guidebook describes them as
鎧をつけたグーマ。
a guma clad in armor. The Mao and Mew, which Link can now defeat with the down thrust, also make an appearance. The former is listed as
ヒョウ
in the Futami guidebook, which is defined as a leopard in Japanese dictionaries. The boss
レボナック
should probably have been romanized to more closely resemble the word knuckle, like the other Nakku enemies. The Rebo in its name may be a short form of the word revolve, in reference to its back and forth motion during the fight. With this temple cleared, Link should now have a raft, which allows him to travel to a new region where he encounters Tektites, Boons, whose name comes from
ブーン
onomatopoeia for buzzing, Giruboku, Aruroda, levers, and basilisks, which are actually just called Zoras in the Japanese version. The English-only hint about using fire when all else fails becomes relevant here, as the Tektites and basilisks can only be defeated with fire in English. On the other hand, both can be defeated with Link's regular sword in Japanese, and the Zoras are actually immune to fire. In Nabooru, a man tells Link about the next item. With boots, I could walk on the water. The Japanese is
聖なるブーツがあれば海の浅瀬を歩ける
if one has the sacred boots, they can walk on water. The man is not speaking specifically about himself, so the use of I in the English is strange. Also, the lack of sacred makes it sound as though any old boots can grant this power. My improvement to the English this time is holy boots let one walk on the water. Another NPC complains of being thirsty, so Link gets water from the fountain approximately 5 meters away from her home. The Futami guide made me laugh with its comment here.
こんな近いなら自分で汲みに来い
As it's this close, get it yourself. The Japanese text that appears when Link interacts with the fountain reads,
水を汲んで行こ
let's take some water. The English equivalent reads, want to get some water, but doesn't offer you any options, nor confirm that you got some. Surely, you got some water would be an improvement here. Yet another NPC says, the river devil eats those who are weak. But her Japanese counterpart just says,
旅人
so my improvement here is, the river devil eats those who approach. This ache wastes a lot of its precious characters by saying, you are persistent, leaving very little room for its hint, find heart over ocean. Therefore, my improvement here is, stop, find a heart using the boots. Also, this ache says ki in Japanese, an onomatopoeic word for high-pitched shrieking that the Kise's name likely comes from. Finally, this NPC advises Link to see a man in Darunia before the islands, while the Japanese more thoroughly explains,
ダルニアのマジシャンに会うまでメイロ島の神殿に入らないことね
do not enter Maze Island's temple until you've met with Darunia's magician. The distinction between the island's temple and the island as a whole is important, because Link first needs to visit the island to rescue a child, so this woman will let him inside her house so he can learn the Reflect spell, which is required to defeat the next temple's boss. Therefore, my improvement to the English this time is get magic in Darunia before the temple. Speaking of Darunia, its Japanese name
ダルニア
resembles
ナルニア
the Japanese way of saying the fictional world that serves as the setting for C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia series, a possible inspiration. I'm pleased to say most of the information Link acquires here is well translated. This woman requests that Link save the kidnapped child, but thanks him for saving her child when he does so. This is either a minor translation error caused by not needing a possessive pronoun in Japanese when talking about one's own family, Or it's a well-considered dark revelation that this woman disowns her children when they fall victim to evil. Another issue is the hint,
神殿には偽の壁がある。
the palace has a false wall. The translation itself is fine, but this hint is not for the next temple. It's for the one after. This ambiguity could be avoided with a different hint. How about, a blue foe guards a false wall? This specifically references the blue iron knuckle in the English version that Link has to fight before the secret being alluded to here. In the Japanese version, this enemy is switched with a muzzler. Before that though, on Maze Island, Link encounters Lizalfos,
ゲール
in Japanese, and in its temple, wizards, or
ウィズザール
in Japanese. Rather than being derived from words in real-world languages, the Zelda series is starting to form its own linguistic traditions. The Foss here being used in Stalfos and Lizalfos, Skullfoss and Lizardfoss respectively. The boss of the dungeon is Karok, who's an absolute pushover, unless you're me, and the item acquired is the Sacred Boots. With them, Link can enter the 5th temple out in the ocean where the false wall is. Here, he encounters Margot, which is katakanaized as
マーゴ
and he acquires the flute. The boss in the English version is Guma, while the Japanese boss is a stronger Germa fencer. Using the flute on the river devil exterminates it and opens the way to Custo. The one remaining resident tells Link he needs to find new Custo in the woods to progress, and one of the houses has a hint written on the wall. Magic key reads, Treasure of Custo. The Japanese hint reads,
魔法の鍵
The magical key
カストの宝
is Treasure of Custo
と書いてある。
is written, explaining that this hint is written on the wall, not that the key has Treasure of Custo written on it. Hammering the trees here reveals Link's next destination, New Custo, where the residents' advice is quite well translated. I'd probably change this hint to The old man in Custo has magic, and this hint reads
砂漠の三つ目岩で神を呼びなさい。
Call the gods at the three-eye rocks in the desert. Another hint found in a house seems to be nonsense in Japanese until you realize you're to read it vertically.
三つ目岩の東の海岸にハートの器があると書いてあるぞ。
There's a heart container at the shore east of the Three-Eye Rocks. My attempt to recreate vertical text for the English version led me to translate it as East from Trio Rock Eyes lies more life. I felt I needed all the words to be 4 letters so there wouldn't be any spaces to give away the answer. Casting spell at the edge of town reveals a building in which lies the magical key. After getting it, Link returns to Custo, where the old man will now teach him thunder, which he'll need in the Great Temple. Before that, however, he needs to go to these 3 rocks and play the flute to reveal the 6th temple. Inside, he acquires the cross, allowing him to see invisible mowers, and he fights the boss,
バルバジア
whose Japanese name closely resembles
バルバジア
in Ocarina of Time. V doesn't exist in Japanese, so it is often represented by the H-line katakana with a dakuten attached, which makes romanization ambiguous, as these symbols are more commonly romanized as B's. Also, the du here can represent both a rhotic R or an L. For these reasons, we have several possibilities for this boss's English name. And with all of these options, the localizers went with Barber. With all 6 temples cleared, it's time to conquer the Great Temple. Inside, Link encounters Fokkeru, Fokka, Big Bubbles, and Big Bots, the first 2 of which have the same name in both versions. The others are called
デグバブル、
and
ボトマスタ
Thunderbird, the first of 2 bosses, is called
ー、ボルバ、
and the final boss is called
リンクの影、
Link's Shadow. After defeating both, Link acquires the Triforce of Courage and uses it to awaken Zelda, first of her name. The text in the ending scene is in English in both versions. And with that, this video is over. Again, if you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, share, and or support on Patreon. I also have a formerly known as Twitter account and a Twitch channel if you'd like to follow. I should be back soon with Lost in Localization, A Link to the Past, but until then, take care and goodbye.